ad tech and beyond. Digital advertising offers unbeatable targeting and measurement. That's been our pitch, anyway, for about 15 years, and it's been made possible by our unique ability for surveillance. For years, online privacy was a niche concern. Our industry regarded personal data collection as benign, and e-privacy legislation taught us to ignore privacy banners on websites. But in June 2013, Edward Snowden revealed massive surveillance being conducted by the NSA and GCHQ in collaboration with some of the biggest names in tech and social media. It set a ball rolling. In March 2018, the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook scandal hit the press. Data protection concepts were being explained in the mainstream news. Data was now a threat to democracy. And in May, the EU GDPR was resonating in the mainstream too. Our banner-ignoring skills adapted to dismissing consent questions, but everyone became more aware of privacy issues. Encryption was front-page news too. It's nerdy tech, and yet the balance of privacy, national security and power became widely understood. Something has changed in the mainstream. Apple's privacy-centered brand positioning has gone into overdrive. They fought publicly over not unlocking iPhones for the FBI, and in May 2019 their intelligent tracking prevention technology launched. Then in June that year, the UK Information Commissioner's Office concluded that current ad tech couldn't exist lawfully. And so here we are in 2020. Things are properly changing. We're seeing new ad tech for insight and measurement and audience building. Google is asserting that privacy-friendly predictions will take over from surveillance-based precision. But users don't behave any differently. We have new views on privacy, but still just click agree so we can get free stuff. One new characteristic of ad tech development is that some privacy-safe measures don't depend on user action. There's quite a lot to consider about cultural changes, user behaviour, how our industry has changed, and where it's all going. Has privacy changed how we pitch digital marketing?
Privacy has had a significant impact, not just in how we pitch digital marketing, but how we practice it day in and day out. So over the past few years, we've lost log-level data for attribution. We've also seen the demise of the cookie. This means that we have to make a pivotal shift into new areas to generate value for our clients. So from a targeting and from an experience perspective, we can no longer think about individuals in the same way. We have to think about how we can bring in different types of data sources to personalize creative. This can be anything from social data through to contextual data of the website that they're on. When it comes to measurement, we can no longer build these accurate customer journey maps. We have to start thinking about incremental lift methodologies such as causal uplift or marketing mix modeling to build a wider picture of effectiveness. So really what I've seen is that over the past few years, privacy has driven innovation in performance marketing rather than stifled it.
Privacy is paramount in this industry, and this sentiment, alongside any legal regulation, i.e. in the US there's the California Consumer Privacy Act, means that during the pitch process, we need to consider what will work and how we plan for privacy as front of mind. Our prospects, alongside any current client, needs to ensure that campaigns are always going to be future-proofed.
As Kev mentioned, for the past 15 years, we've pitched digital advertising with unbeatable advertising and measurement capabilities. However, as people's awareness around their personal data begins to grow exponentially, and as Chrome have recently announced that they're going to begin to phase out third-party cookies, both of these two things are going to be compromised. I don't see every RFP that we receive, but my understanding is that questions around privacy and identity haven't quite made it into pitches yet. I don't, however, expect this to last for long. I also think that in the slightly longer term, we're actually going to receive some identity-specific briefs if Croud, as an agency, decide to position themselves in that way. Kind of outside of pitches, we're working on a number of initiatives that fit into kind of two categories. Firstly, alternatives to third-party cookies when it comes to both audience building and measurement. And then secondly, alternative targeting solutions to third-party cookies. So looking at things around contextual buys and category-based targeting.
Does it matter when marketing is creepy? And will anything change if it stops?
So I think it's a really interesting question around how data is used within advertising, and does it ever become creepy with the amount of data that marketers have in order to target and personalize ads? I don't know if you recall, there was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, Coke had a very successful campaign using video on demand and using people's logged in data to serve them personalised Coke cans as a kind of video pre-roll to what they were watching. And that was perceived really well. Since then, you've had various scandals such as Cambridge Analytica and now much more legislation coming in. And I definitely think there's a shift and a pivot in how users want to interact with media. And when we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago in marketing, it was all around personalization. And there is still that personalization demand. People want highly personalized ads that are relevant to them, but they don't want it to be known that marketer specifically has data on exactly who they are and where they live. And there is a very delicate balance which we need to strike within digital marketing in order to achieve that. And I think definitely brand trust and brand kind of awareness plays a large part in it. So the likes of Coca-Cola, as I mentioned, were able to run a campaign like that as they were a brand who people didn't mind if they knew that they were called Claire and they'd stuck their name onto a Coke can. But if it's a relatively unknown brand with little brand equity and brand trust around it, then the backlash against that utilisation of personal data can be much, much more.
We always have to balance relativeness and effectiveness versus what customers really want. So it's interesting, 71% of customers get disappointed if they have an impersonal or poor shopping experience. Yet only 25% of customers trust what large companies do with their data. So really for me, it's about building the right informed consent mechanisms that exist within our marketing tech stack. And that's all about finding the right level of personalization for the right audience. Because really that might differ quite significantly by category and by brand. And if we do this, then we can honestly deliver the maximum amount of impact and personalization, but at the same time, use the minimum amount of personal data.
Yes, it absolutely matters if marketing is creepy. We encourage all of our clients to work closely with partners to ensure that they collect a minimal amount of PII from their consumers and absolutely what is only necessary and relevant. That's why all active data collection should be visible, easily understandable, opt-in, and most importantly, opt-out features to increase the safety of consumers and their data. We have to not only respect consumer privacy, but consider this during our campaign planning processes too.
Ultimately, we also need to ensure that all of this advertising is underpinned with transparency. And one thing that helps with this is Chrome's Why Am I Seeing This Ad feature. This appears at the top right of all ads, and it provides users with additional information as to why they're seeing their ads and what kind of data points have led to the delivery of this ad. Chrome have actually said that 15 million people interact with this feature every single day, so it's clearly something that's very important for consumers.
Does it matter what users think about digital privacy?
I think a user's opinions around digital privacy should be a central and critical concern for all marketers and media specialists. At Croud, we believe in delivering great experiences for users. Now, how can we deliver those great experiences if their wishes are being actively disregarded? Privacy should be central to our strategy.
It definitely matters what users think about digital privacy. At the end of the day, these users are the customers that we're relying on. There are so many companies that are privy to really sensitive consumer data, and there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. Brands should be building these trusting relationships with these consumers and must be considered when planning a campaign for all channels. Marketing, communication, and targeting should really help individuals move through that consideration funnel to book or buy a product, whatever the brand is selling. So there needs to be general principles in place for responsible data usage, especially across the more sensitive verticals such as health or finance. The notion, however, does tend to create retargeting pain points, and this is something that needs to be considered and will also change as we're moving forward into the future, especially during times of a pandemic. For example, spending more time in the household on the same IP address as loved ones can really make retargeting risky, especially for those with closely held health or business needs.
I think to put it simply, yes, of course it does. Everyone should have control of their own personal information. And ultimately, these concerns that users have had so far have led to, firstly, the introduction of GDPR, and secondly, the follow-up of the ICO report in 2019. User privacy and the confidence of users has to kind of be at the core of advertising and has to be at the core of the industry moving forward.
What are your favourite privacy-safe ad tech solutions?
Sandbox solutions such as Google Ads Data Hub are quite interesting. What they allow us to do is to collect user data, but on a slightly aggregated level, mix it up with journey data, contextual data to drive some insights around the customer and also around effectiveness. So these are very useful data sets for us, but the challenge remains. The challenge remains that whilst media specialists in agencies no longer have access to this user level data, large corporations such as Apple, Google, Facebook are still using this individual customer data to power their targeting day in and day out. So the question remains, if regulations continue to increase and become stricter, will even these sandboxes still be a viability for the future?
So we mentioned earlier Chrome's Why Am I Seeing This Ad feature. They've recently taken this a step further and launched a Chrome extension in alpha called Ads Transparency Spotlight. And this gives the user even more transparency over the different criteria used to show the ads, as well as the different ad platforms that are actually showing these ads. Another initiative that's being talked about a lot in the industry at the moment, and that again is being led by Chrome, is the Privacy Sandbox, which is an open standard initiative. And the core thinking here is that instead of reporting sitting within the server, it actually sits directly with the client. And the way that they do this is via a number of different APIs that again are being worked on in an open source environment. These APIs are there to solve a number of different use cases that are required for the personalization of ads, including ad selection, conversion measurement, and fraud protection. The important thing here is obviously that while doing all of these things, they're not sharing any personally identifiable information. Finally, from a programmatic perspective, the Trade Desk are working on the second iteration of their unified ID. And the idea is, again, to use an open source environment to create a sign-on solution for the open web. Unified ID 2.0 looks like it will initially work via the encryption of email addresses for signed-on users. There's still a lot of work to be done here to kind of get all of the publishers on board with this new sign-on solution, but it seems to be a really good start.
What are the biggest ways our industry will change over the next 5 years?
It's incredibly hard to predict where digital marketing will be in 1 year, let alone 5 years. But what we can do is look at the vision and the needs of the CEOs and the CMOs. According to IBM, their number one desire is to connect up that user experience. So for us as agencies, that means that we have to decide on whether to double down on specialism or become generalists that really bring that ecosystem together. Number two, it's a relentless focus on accountability. More and more CMOs are becoming replaced with chief revenue officers. So as agencies, we have to really nail effectiveness and put it at the heart of our operating model. And finally, what they really want to be doing is innovating in customer experience. So right now, we have to think about what are the new channels and the new modes of engagement that customers have with media and with advertising. Right now, augmented reality is huge. What's going to be the next step and how can we invest in it?
I think to start with, it's certainly going to change for the better. This needs to be seen as like a massive step forward and not a setback for the industry. Ultimately, we hope to reach a place where we are able to maintain the kind of similar levels of insight that we're seeing at the moment and a similar level of targeting functionality, but whilst ensuring that all privacy concerns are kind of paramount and at the forefront. And ultimately, this is going to be done by avoiding the exposure of any personal user data. In the next 5 years, I think a number of current ad tech products are going to struggle. This is due to the fact that there's going to be a limit to cross-site tracking. And as a result, there's going to be an inevitable impact on the user-level personalization of ads. I also think DMPs need to kind of reconsider their third-party element and their third-party cookie offering, but it kind of remains to be seen how they're going to address that. Ultimately, I think cookies are being replaced, but as we all know, cookies are outdated, cookies are archaic. There needs to be some kind of change to cookies anyway. Kev, I'm actually sure you mentioned this in the blog that you wrote back in 2016.